Okay, well, guys, I'd like to introduce my panel anyway, first of all. So, first of all, we have Ling from McKinsey. We have Nick Rockwell from the New York Times, and we got Jason Melo from ADP. So, I'm going to get comfortable. Try not to break the microphones when we sit down. So, thank you very much. It's fantastic. I think we've all heard from Jason already today. So, so just really quickly, a high-level overview. You know exactly who Jason is because he told you at the start of his talk. Nick is the CTO down at the New York Times, and obviously is previously is here at Condé Nast, and then Ling actually works for McKinsey, and I don't know what you can say about what you do, but I guess to help people cope.
Part of our McKinsey Digital Labs, and I co-lead our Agile and DevOps practice there. So work with a lot of institutes around microservices, DevOps, and those transformations.
Perfect stuff. And we're just going to go through just some of the kind of the businessy and organizational kind of challenges you're going to meet during a digital transformation. So we'll start at the beginning. Maybe Jason, what is a digital transformation, and why on earth would you bother doing one? So that's
I think if I think about it simply, I think digital transformations are about attacking friction and promoting velocity in the organization, right? And at the same time, at least for us, and our journey was about from a horizontal, from a breadth perspective, how do we really get kind of proactive alignment from everyone in that organization, kind of in that same theme of friction reduction, velocity, and rinse and repeat across that. And as I said in my talk, it's not, technology is a component of that, but it really kind of first and foremost starts with your organizational structure, in the spirit of Conway, almost.
Exactly, and I guess there's loads of phrases in there that actually sound like it's possible to do. Getting people aligned, and things up there. It's like that's something that can be done, yeah. So I guess that's the dream, right? So you're going to have software coming out quickly, and you're going to have it produced safely, and you're going to have people aligned. But in terms of that process to move from where you are with maybe a bit of friction, slow delivery times, maybe a bit of brittleness in your code bases, things like that. How long to do or to complete one of these digital transformations so your organization starts to work well? What do you think? Okay.
Yeah, no, it is a question that a lot of companies are wrestling with, and I end up doing a lot of work with financial institutes, banks, and they're making huge transitions, right, from a brick and mortar type of environment where you're in ATMs or in an actual branch to now really being banking as a service or e-commerce. So it's a massive change for them. It's bringing their back office retail banking to now front office kind of digital attention. And so there's that transformation is, a lot of what Jason said, people. It's a big people cultural change. I think there's a huge, massive transformation on the technology side. And then overall, I think they're changing the way you work into really more like waterfall to now more agile, autonomous teams. And that transition, I think for many large institutes, it's an ongoing thing. It can take them 2, 3, or more years to actually get to a place where they feel mature and steady state. But certainly they're starting to capture value very quickly, even within 3 or 4 months. They're almost doing what Jason and his organization are doing, almost like creating an incubator. How can you get really started, inspire the organization, and start really capturing some digital value?
Brilliant. And obviously you've done this once or twice, Nick. How do you know you're winning? Like, how do you know it's going well or you're on the right track?
That's a good question. I think
From your inside.
Yeah,
These
so
chaotic.
How do you know you're winning?
Yeah.
Well, that assumes that you are winning. So you
Exactly.
could also ask how do you know you're losing, because that can happen too. I think it depends how you frame it. I would probably frame the challenge a little bit differently than these guys have, at least so far. Because I think a lot of the things that we talk about are actually they're actually constants within any within technology. So trying to move faster, trying to overcome the old school way of doing things and adopt the new school at any moment in time are constants that's been happening as long as there's been technology, probably not just digital technology, but forever. So I don't know about that. I think the biggest change that you're looking to make is a change in the attitude towards risk in the company, not in a broad way, because a lot of companies understand risk well from an investment perspective, but they don't understand it at all in the new world from an operational perspective. So that would be part of it. And then the other part would be a lot of companies that never had to do product development now have to do product development, and they have no clue how to do that. So I would say when executives start to understand, like truly understand, not the details of an agile process, but the principles behind an agile process.
Yes.
And you start to hear them say it, and they're not getting it wrong. They're not just saying like let's be agile, and they don't just mean like deliver something faster. That's how you know you're making some progress.
Excellent. The education is a huge part of digital transformation, isn't it? I mean, that's sometimes almost the biggest piece. But the education, I suppose, is one aspect, but the willingness to change maybe as well, and the willingness to say, okay, it's one thing understanding agile, but another thing actually trying to put it into execution in a real way. I mean, that's where the fun really starts. You start attacking sacred cows and trying to pull down things in the organization.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's interesting because you find out, like, some organizations are better at change than others, and some people are better at change than others. So sometimes that's an easy part, and sometimes that's like the hardest part. But I'm sure you know a couple things about that.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it is really just seeing the teams work. A lot of the success is are the teams happy? Like, are actually the developers happy? Are they working on the things they really are passionate about and excited about? So I think there's an element of just that culture, and I think oftentimes when we do digital transformations, we pay a lot of attention about the top level messages, right? Like, are we doing more digital sales? Are we making customers happy? But ultimately, I think what organizations need to also focus on is the organization health. Like, are our new developers happy? Are we working in the right way? Are we stuck and still bureaucratic, or we've been able to unlock that?
Yeah, and that's to kind of get that. Then I suppose there's two kind of ways you can go about that. I don't know. Maybe you refer to them as either through or around, but creating that bubble of happy people and then like spreading it out, or do you try and make everybody happy? Kind of attack the problem head on, and maybe. Nick, I'd say you've probably been involved in both those approaches. Do you want to talk about the pros and cons, or?
Sure, a bit. So, I'm old. I've been doing this for a long time, for 20 years. So I was around for the first wave, the first kind of digital internet bubble phase. And that whole process, that whole time, especially for media companies in New York, everyone seemed to be heavily influenced by Clayton Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma. So it was all about, it's hopeless to change the mothership. Like, you have to find some way to like not really look and do something off to the side, and something magical will happen, and then later you'll sort it all out. I think we wasted 10 years doing that. I think Conde wasted 10 years, and New York Times charitably wasted 10 years doing that. I was at MTV before that, and we wasted maybe a bit less. Like, TV seemed to get it a little faster at first and then stall, so like now they're wasting time. Sorry. But I've come to think that, and unfortunately, like, the idea of the skunk works, and I know both of you guys have the word lab somewhere floating around you, so apologize for what I'm going to say. I think the mythology of the skunk works is very strong, and the appeal is very strong, and clearly there are a few heroic examples of it working well. Too often, I think it's an excuse to do something kind of flashy and fun in a safe place where it's not going to like mess with the actual core business. So I'll say it's situational, but I've kind of come to believe that it's better to just go straight to the quadruple bypass and like start dealing with the real issues, because you're going to have to do it later. And what can happen is you can create something great, and then when you finally do try to like integrate it, you kill it, and then you're back to square one.
That's great. I don't want to start a fight, but obviously, Jason, as an alternate to that,
it's situational.
No, exactly. It's exactly what I was going to say. I think it is situational. It's contextual. Like, do you have the right company for that to exist? Do you have the leadership support? Do you have kind of the building blocks, the raw materials to make that happen? And I think if you're dealing with an organization, at least in our case, right, we actually shed the lab moniker from us because it was about, focusing on shipping a product, right, being a product and engineering-led organization, and being able to do that not in spite of ADP in our situation, but recognizing where they were at and how we needed to do things a little bit differently. So it wasn't, we started in that model, right? We said, hey, let's get a fancy office in Chelsea, really kind of fun neighborhood. Let's get some kind of folks with propellers on their hats and put them in a room and good things will happen. We quickly saw that there was not really anything good or of kind of sustaining value for the organization that's going to come of that. And so we really kind of, did a reorg. And it was kind of interesting to do a reorg of something that was still so early days and wasn't kind of a big enterprise that we needed to change. But it was recognizing that we cannot just apply that pattern and hope for the best. We have to be very mission-driven and mission-focused in terms of what we need to do. So.
And that's the key difference, isn't it? It's like, has somebody in leadership read summary of an article in the Harvard Business Review and decided they needed digital transformation and created a lab to kind of tip the hat? Or are they actually committed to change and to embracing these new things?
And as Ling mentioned, right, it's about, your leadership is actually, drinking that punch, right? And they are fully on board and committed and understand what it takes and what that means, and they're not just kind of throwing out terminology and approaches without actually understanding the commitment necessary to make that happen.
So. I think some of the challenges is if you start as a lab or incubator and stop there, you're not really growing it beyond there. That's where you get stuck, right? I think the idea is how do you continue to grow that journey into something that takes over a bit of the core. But we're seeing more and more now where organizations are no longer just like, oh, we want to do something on the side. Let's start from the inside out, and it's harder, but it's also something that's there's more buy-in now from leadership on like this is something we need to do.
Yeah, and it always struck me that it was a bit strange. It's like we drive on the left in Ireland, right, and you drive on the right over here. We're always kind of thinking we're going to swap, right? And digital transformation is a bit like that. You're making a big change, but it doesn't really work as doing it in phases. If you get all the trucks to change first, and you get a lot of collisions. I think that's the way when you get a labs project, then and you try and bring it back in, you really do get a lot of bounce and a lot of tension and friction. So yeah, no, thank you. That's absolutely fantastic. So within that, somebody already mentioned Conway. So Conway obviously comes into play a lot with these things. I don't know whether do you want to talk about kind of what Conway said and how it kind of comes into play during a digital transformation, Nick, maybe you want to?
Sure. So, does everybody know what Conway's law is for the most part? Okay, so I'm going to see if I can get it from memory. It's like an organization will produce systems that the structure of which mirrors their communication. Communication is a key word, and they like their communication patterns or something like that. So, so the idea colloquially is like that you build systems that mirror your organizational structure. And I think nowadays people use it like sort of ironically or like with a roll of the eyes. But I actually think that Melvin Conway just meant it as an actual observation. And I think as an observation, if you just sort of take it on its face, it's like it makes a lot of sense. And it's actually not a bad thing or a good thing. It's sort of a neutral observation. So I think thinking about it in that spirit, the thing you need to take into account is, that first of all, that architecture and organization probably have to change in some kind of like symbiotic way, in some kind of lockstep. And then second, that it might be easier to change the architecture through changing the organization than the other way around, because at least it's more of an explicit approach. So. Exactly,
and the other thing is then how much does it play into winning in a digital transformation? Because if you're changing the architectural approach and fighting this organization that's not going to change, that's you're just asking for trouble. But whereas does it ever come into play that you can force changes using architecture, or do you have to change the org first, or what's your?
Yeah, I think anything that starts with kind of the words force or prescribe or any of that is going to fall flat on its face, as it should. We are in a kind of high talent knowledge worker situation. All of us are, and these are folks that they're professionals and they know what they're doing. And if you just want to kind of come and tell them, hey, change, do something different, you have to, I think, kind of foster those environments for that to occur. And, as Nick mentioned, kind of that, kind of open heart surgery. It's look top to bottom, what do we fundamentally need to change? And we take it from we kind of call it a right to left goals approach, right? So we'll put up a bunch of goals kind of on the right-hand side of a whiteboard and say, okay, this is where we want to get to. How do we fill in the details to actually get there? And inspecting the entire stack, including the people to be there.
Exactly, yeah. That's the key thing, I guess, to understand about these kind of things is getting the right people involved. And I suppose the first place you're going to start is this new magical title that has crept up, which is a CDO. So what's a CDO, Ling, and why do you need one?
No, it's a good question. So I think the term kind of derives, in an organization, there's the C-level folks of a CIO or CTO that's really focused on technology and the actual architecture of it, and also a little bit of the business of technology. But then there's, on the other side, there's where you have be a COO or a business unit head that's thinking about, for their business areas, how do we actually capture value? How do we make kind of business dollars? And I think that in the digital transformation, in the digital transformation, I think you have two sides of the puzzle, and you don't really have someone to help really have that single vision on how do we take this to the next level. So a CDO has, and oftentimes this is during the transformation, and as the company matures, that role might just evolve to be non-existent. It's almost like transformation role. So that's a role that comes into place to think about. There's almost three areas, right? They're really obsessed about the customer. They're thinking about, how do we actually really improve the experience, the overall transformation for the customer. I think they're also really bridging the gap on technology. Like they're actually also very knowledgeable on what technology is and how to capture the values of technologies and what the trade-offs are. And then thirdly, they are very fluent with the business. So I think that three together is what's that role encompasses to really carry the mission of, how do we make our customers super delighted using kind of digital and our business assets.
Sounds like the kind of person that grows on trees. Very easy to find, easy to hire.
Yes.
And that's it. So and again, guys, you're both CTO technically, are you? What are you?
No.
You're a different title, but neither of you are CDO, right?
No.
So, and do you have somebody to play that role, or do you?
For us, not really. I think kind of everyone in the kind of the senior leadership group kind of wears a portion of that hat, at different times, but we don't have that as an established role within the organization.
We don't, strictly speaking, either. There's someone who sort of plays that role. It's a little different because they have a newsroom role as well, so it's a little more complicated.
Exactly. Yeah. It strikes me as one of those roles where it's like when with the new team structures we have now. Very often, the words project manager never appear, but projects do have to be managed, and things like that. So it's one of those roles where you kind of have to understand what has to be achieved by that role and make sure that role is covered. It might not necessarily be a person, but it's critical to actually build that bridge between this kind of business requirement, somebody who understands that, and the technicals that drive it. I guess the other thing really then is the implementation team, devs themselves. When you start a transformation, that's a very exciting time for devs, right? So you can easily attract the talent at that point. But how do you keep these kind of explorer-type devs interested, Jason?
Yeah, it's interesting for us too, because we're really kind of at that point in our organizational journey where it's kind of the first couple of years or so, it's really about kind of critical areas to really establish our existence, right? And now that we're getting into the market, getting to a steadier state with certain areas, this kind of explorer mentality is creeping up, and how do we foster that growth and kind of tee up opportunities for those folks. And it starts to trickle into areas where we look at kind of our SRE teams. A lot of folks kind of gravitate towards that area. They want to be able to kind of go deeper, help across kind of a whole kind of breadth of the organization to truly kind of productionize even further a lot of the systems that we're doing. As areas emerge, and we need to essentially kind of bootstrap what we call work streams, which are essentially kind of domains within the organization. That's where we look at kind of these, architectural, whether leaders or individual contributors, to get involved in those efforts and embed with those early teams to bring a lot of that forward. And that tends to be exciting for those folks to have those opportunities. And it's really important that you don't have the kind of traditional, hey, you're a great developer, you'll probably be a great manager, and just kind of silo someone into that career path.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing in terms of actually structuring the working environment properly is actually giving developers that role of, making them masters of their own destiny, allowing them to decide and set their own timelines and commit themselves rather than having somebody else commit on their behalf, right? And that whole aspect of creating a good developer environment and that genuine respect for the different people on the team, that's a key part of making these things work, I think, because you have a gap otherwise, right? You need the old model of, the manager driving it and, I promised I'd have it out by the end of the quarter, so let's go on a debt march and let's everybody work till 12 o'clock at night. That doesn't really work over time, especially when people are thinking about platform and product versus project approach, right? So, interesting. And, one of the things, I guess, so you've got high-level buy-in, you've got your transformation started, everything is starting to go well. How important is it, or how difficult is it to get the word out that you've got a traditional organization that are changing, and now it's a good place to work, where previously it might have been, not perceived that way per se. Maybe you've got a big legacy name, been around for 60 years or so with a big platform, So what do you think, how important is it to get the word out, like, in terms of attracting talent? Or
Yeah, I don't think of it quite that way. I mean, I think it's sort of dangerous to overemphasize the engineering culture in an artificial way within a company. I mean, again, it's sort of easy when you're starting something, but it doesn't, when you're, that's only going to last for a certain period of time. I think it also kind of feeds some impulses and sort of a story that a lot of younger developers in particular have been told it's not really a good story for them to really internalize too much, which is about this thing about beginning and about starting with a clean slate and doing something that's new versus something that's old. Because, I mean, I think you don't really grow and learn as an engineer until you've had to deal with some fairly shitty legacy, especially if it's your own. Like, that's the best situation.
Absolutely.
When you have to clean up your own mess. So I worry about that a little bit. And then I guess the other thing I would say is that, like, at the times I've actually tried to sort of tone down the extent to which we talk about the developer culture. And I've tried to turn up, but we talk about the mission of the whole company. I mean, at the end of the day, what I really want is people who care about what we're doing. And of course care passionately about the best ways, how to do software development. But if that's all that they care about and they're indifferent to our mission, we're just kicking the can down the road. And eventually, like something tough is going to come along, and are they going to weather through that, or are they going to look somewhere else? So I lead, and we're lucky at the times we have a strong sense of mission and a good brand, and not everybody, but a lot of people are really interested in supporting what we do. So I really lead with that and focus on that, and then when it feels necessary, like, I hope that the organization and the people that a candidate's going to meet as they come through the process are going to speak for themselves. And we also do, like, we talk a lot about what we do, and we try to genuinely, like, give back as much as we can. So that hopefully gets the word out a little bit that we're doing things.
I think that's a really, really important word, is that genuine, or that authentic, say, what I consider a working experience, because
engineers are tough to fool. Engineers are tough to fool, because they tend to be
especially over
smart,
time,
skeptical a lot.
Exactly. But I think it really has to be real, and I think one of the things that we're seeing in the industry now is that a bit like you know, you referenced the last bubble, right, in the 90s, right? And it's amazing. It's the exact same phrasing again, right? It's like it's all the same as it was back then. And you know, you had an awful lot of plastic type approaches. You know, we'll explain that we're agile so we can attract people, and that doesn't last. It's not sustainable. You know, you have to be real, and you know, that's why I love this idea of actually getting people bought in. You know, you want to be, you know, that janitor in the space center when JFK visited, and he asked him what he did. The guy said, "Well, I'm putting somebody in the moon. That's why I mop the floors every day, right?" So, and that's what you want, you know, and that's what you really, really need. And there's a whole life cycle as well, right? Because this is the big thing about it. You know, you can have great FOMO code, and you can do it from starting from scratch. But when you need to get it live, you need to maintain it, right? And you can often see that. You can often, we talk about the scars you can see of an experienced developer's code. It's completely different than somebody who's new, right? So, and what's an ideal person then for your organization in terms of a digital transformation? What kind of person are you trying to get in the door then? What do they look like ideally?
For me, it's like I said. First of all, it's someone who cares about the mission of the Times. Someone who cares about what we do. Then they, you know, ideally share the kind of core values that we do as a team, which are going to sound like the same core values everybody spouts out, but, you know, openness, collaboration, no jerks, you know, willingness to learn, you know, learn from failures, learn from successes, learn as much, you know, from everything, and a willingness to collaborate. So, you know, cross those hurdles, and then we like people who make good technical decisions. That's always helpful. So yeah, I mean, the bar gets pretty high pretty fast.
That's exactly it. And at the moment, it is difficult to get really talented people and really people who are kind of, the attitude for me is as much as being able to write good code, right? And what about you, Jason? And how do you think is that?
It's really similar, right? It's about kind of the openness to learning, the constant curiosity. You know, as Nick mentioned, kind of, you know, you're not a jerk. You actually want to kind of spend time with this person and have them as part of your organization. I think the kind of having someone who shares your kind of total mission from day one is a little bit more challenging. I think you want to look for kind of sparks or hints that they'll be on this journey with you. And then from a technical perspective, we are really kind of keen on breadth, but then having what we call spikes, right? We want to see spikes. The spikes don't have to fully align with maybe like what our need is or what that area is, but that there are spikes, because spikes to us are indicative of being able to spike in other areas. So.
Can I add something to that really quickly?
Yeah.
Because like
Please,
people at the Times talk about that as T-shaped.
Yeah.
And I think that actually people out all over the place talk about that as T-shaped. But when I got to the Times, I thought it was like a Times thing. It was like T.
Oh.
but I've started to feel like, yeah, one spike is nice, but two spikes is actually like transformational. Like I really look for people who can go deep on two things. And I don't mean like two closely related things. I mean like developers who understand design or are interested in, you know, in product or something like this. And so that's, I would call that pie-shaped. I'm just trying that out.
That's a nice one.
Pie-shaped. Okay. That's new. I think you guys probably get credit for the T-shaped thing, don't you, McKinsey?
No, I think that's an industry. I think that's an industry, but I'll take credit for it today.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all about the power of three.
Yeah.
Three horizons.
Three in a box.
And in that, I mean, obviously, when you work with people, you've got to try and do the same thing, right? You've got to try and
Yes.
get these people in and
The
help.
talent's hard. I mean, what Jason and Nick said is exactly right. Where I think what we're seeing from organization is paying engineers top dollar is like, or just something in terms of just the right compensation is table stakes. I think we're seeing a lot where they do value this mission and like what is the company about? Are they genuinely about that?
Yeah.
And then secondly, it's just like a seat at the table. And I think it's so much around like engineers or just team members being able to make the decisions around what that product might be, what they think might be valuable, having a voice. Like a lot of that, I think, gets pressed in larger organizations. But I think if you surface that, we're seeing even smaller, like big, large organizations where you bring it into that environment, they get really excited about it. And just like-minded people, if they see people they want to work with, it's a great recruiting tool.
Exactly, yeah. That's very good. I have to say now, I love the pie-shaped idea, you know, because it's critical, right? Because if you look back at whatever, let's go back 18 months or even a bit more, right? DevOps was different. Go back 18 months again, completely different again. The ability to learn and the ability to spike new levels is actually more than half of what you're looking for, I would say. You know, that ability to learn, that hunger for new knowledge. You know, that turning up to events like this, I guess, try to find out what's next. Always a good sign. So, well, thank you very much for your time. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah.
Great.
Thanks, guys. So we're going to break for lunch for 1 hour, back here at 2 o'clock for the afternoon's talks. I believe Nick will be talking to us later on. I like that you can't do it in a lab. You got to just do it for real. I'm a big fan of that.